It wasn't the words that stung, it was how casually she said them, like flicking lint off her designer blazer. Allison Wexler, freshly returned from her MBA program in California, didn't even sit down when she fired me. Her eyes barely met mine as she handed me a pink slip that might as well have been printed weeks ago. Wexler Tech had been a second home to me for nearly 2 decades. From its modest beginnings producing custom conveyor modules to becoming one of the region's top automation suppliers, I'd helped build every part of its operational system. Located in a repurposed warehouse in the industrial sector of Columbus, Ohio, the company had always valued precision and people. At least, it used to. I'm Frank Dalton, 58. I don't have a flashy degree or a TikTok presence, but I know every gear, circuit, and person in this company. When Richard Wexler, the founder, was forced to retire for health reasons, he shook my hand and said, "Keep the heart of this place beating, Frank." Turns out, the new leadership had a different idea of cardiac care. Allison strode in like she owned the place, which technically she did, but she didn't understand it. Within 48 hours, she'd replaced half the floor managers with consultants and held a meeting about streamlining legacy redundancy. That was her way of saying people like me were disposable. She didn't even review my file, didn't ask what I did. I didn't protest. I packed my things slowly, deliberately. Framed photo of my wife and kids. A coffee mug that said, "Keep calm and calibrate." 18 years of routines and early mornings tucked into a cardboard box. The young engineers I had mentored avoided eye contact. Maybe they were afraid she'd come for them next. I sat in my pickup, staring at the building one last time. The sun glinted off the glass doors like they were sealing shut behind me. That's when I opened my glove box and pulled out my employment contract. I don't know why. I guess part of me wasn't ready to let go. My eyes landed on Section 14, termination without cause, full severance equal to 24 months' salary. My fingers tightened around the wheel. I dialed Gordon Parks, an old friend, former union rep turned employment attorney. We hadn't talked in months, but he picked up on the first ring. "Frank," he said, no small talk. "You finally calling about that clause we put in back in 2010? "Yeah," I replied. "I think I need it." "I'll need a copy of the contract, termination letter, and any emails," Gordon instructed. "And Frank, don't speak to anyone at Wexler. Not yet." I hung up, heart pounding, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't over. Not even close. The legal paper in front of me might as well have been a golden ticket. Gordon leaned back in his worn leather chair, reading glasses perched low on his nose. He wasn't smiling, but he was close. Gordon's office sat above a bakery downtown, its faint smell of cinnamon and old books wrapping around you like a quilt. It hadn't changed since he first opened shop. Shelves crammed with case files, a dusty coffee machine, and a filing cabinet with one drawer permanently stuck. But the mind behind the desk was sharp as ever. I first met Gordon during a union contract dispute 15 years ago. He wasn't flashy, no designer suits or slick hair, just relentless logic, the kind that made corporate lawyers sweat. He helped rewrite my contract after a close call layoff back in 2010. That's when Section 14 was born. "This isn't about revenge," I told him. "It's about respect. She thinks we're all disposable." He nodded. "And when you let people like that lead unchecked, the whole foundation rots. We'll send a letter of demand first. Keep it civil. Let's give them a chance to do the right thing." Gordon outlined the process: demand, negotiation, and, if needed, litigation. But you say nothing to them directly. No emails, no social media. When Gordon flipped through the HR notices I'd discreetly collected from former coworkers, his brow furrowed. "Donna Ruiz, 54, let go. Mike Bennett, 61, gone." "That's a pattern, Frank." I leaned in. "You think it's discrimination?" "I think it's actionable," he replied. Gordon drafted a preliminary document. "We need their stories. Patterns win cases." I called Dana, then Mike, then Jennifer from Quality Control. One by one, they agreed to talk. Most were still stunned. A few were angry. All were ready. "I want to do more than sue," I told Gordon as I left. "I want to build something better." He raised an eyebrow. "Then you'd better start by calling the right people." That night, I picked up my phone and dialed Mike Bennett. It was time to reconnect with the past and reshape the future. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told a different story. Red-rimmed, tired. I hadn't seen Dana Ruiz in over a year, but the second she slid into the booth across from me, I saw the same no-nonsense fire that had made her one of Wexler's best. The diner was nothing fancy, just cracked vinyl booths, burnt coffee, and a jukebox that hadn't worked since Obama's first term. But it had always been our spot after late-night shifts or Saturday repairs. It was neutral ground, safe, familiar. Mike Bennett showed up 5 minutes later, still wearing his old denim jacket with the "Don't Tread on Me" patch. He looked more tired than Dana. Mike had built half of Wexler's engineering systems and trained the other half. If he was out too, I knew something was rotten beyond just me. "I've got a kid in college," Dana said, "and now no insurance." Mike nodded. "I'm too old to start over, too young to retire. Feels like they just wiped our lives off a whiteboard." I leaned forward. "You're not alone, and you're not finished." I explained what Gordon and I had found, the pattern, the age factor, the clause in my contract. "We could fight back," I said. "Legally, yeah, but also, what if we built something that made Wexler obsolete?" Dana raised an eyebrow. "You mean start our own company?" "Not just any company, the right company." "Louis Tanner wants to talk," I said. Mike blinked. "The Tanner robotics guy?" "He's expanding, looking for leadership. He's got funding but no infrastructure. He knows what we can do." Dana crossed her arms. "You trust him?" "I trust that he hates Wexler more than we do. That's a start." Mike glanced at Dana. She gave a slow nod. "I'll hear him out," she said. Mike sighed. "If we're going to go down swinging, might as well aim for something worth hitting." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'll set up the meeting," I said. "Tomorrow, noon. He's waiting." As we left the diner, the chill outside didn't feel quite so sharp. For the first time since I was fired, I wasn't walking alone. He didn't even blink when I laid out what we were planning. Louis Tanner had always been a man of few words and deep pockets. He looked me square in the eye and gave a single nod, like we were sealing a deal forged in fire, not paper. Tanner Robotics' office was all glass, brushed steel, and minimalism, a far cry from the rust and sawdust ambiance of Wexler Tech. It was a place built for the future but still waiting for its soul. Louis had converted a logistics center on the south end of Columbus into a scalable facility, but it needed leadership, vision, and something real. I'd first met Louis 5 years ago at a manufacturing expo. Back then, he was chasing military contracts, and I was presenting Wexler's fail-safe valve designs. We'd had coffee, exchanged cards, and never lost touch. "You always struck me as the guy keeping the wheels on while the execs chased tailpipes," he'd said. "I won't bankroll a revenge project," Louis said. "If we're doing this, it's not about getting even, it's about getting better. Cleaner designs, smarter systems, custom solutions." I nodded. No baggage, no bitterness, just blueprints. Dana brought out her QA reports. Mike had sketched a modular actuator design on graph paper. I presented the market gap, small to mid-volume hydraulic assemblies, highly customizable, ignored by mass production giants. "Allison called it a waste of time," I said. "We call it opportunity." Louis leaned back, hands folded. "You'll have initial funding, but I want 5 engineers in 30 days. People who can think, build, and stay out of HR trouble." I swallowed. Deal. That afternoon, I drove to the east side and met Jason Wright at a machine shop he'd been freelancing for. He looked up from a prototype with grease on his forehead and determination in his eyes. "Ever get tired of being underpaid and ignored?" I asked. "Constantly." "Good, I've got a seat for you." We called it Corner Core, a nod to the idea of rebuilding from the structural foundations. Mike said it best. "You don't start with the walls, you start with the corners." We didn't have desks yet. We didn't have a logo, but we had belief, blueprints, and people who'd been underestimated too many times. The conference room was too clean, too quiet, like the calm before a courtroom thunderstorm. Gordon's voice sliced through the sterile tension, echoing off the glass walls. He didn't raise his voice, but no one doubted the weight behind his words. We were on the 17th floor of a law firm downtown, neutral ground, technically. The view overlooked the Columbus skyline, but all eyes were locked on the document shown by me. Gordon slid across the table. On the other side sat Allison, flanked by a too young corporate attorney named Justin McKay, who hadn't stopped fiddling with his pen. Justin couldn't have been more than 28, barely older than some of the interns I'd trained. His blazer still had stitching on the sleeve, and he kept glancing at Allison like waiting for instructions. Poor kid didn't realize he'd stepped into a buzzsaw. "We're willing to offer 3 months' pay," she said, folding her arms. "That's more than generous for someone who undermined my leadership." Gordon didn't even blink. "You'll find the definition of undermining is not listed as cause in Section 14, nor is being inconvenient." Gordon read aloud. "Termination without documented cause, including written warnings and progressive disciplinary action, shall result in severance equivalent to 24 months of the employee's final salary." He turned the page. "And here are the age discrimination patterns. 6 employees over 50 terminated in the same week, with no formal complaints filed." The door opened. Heads turned. Charles Wexler walked in, cane tapping on the hardwood floor like a gavel. Allison's face drained of color. "I told you to read the contracts," he said simply. Then to Justin, "Honor the severance fully." Justin nodded quickly. Allison fumed but said nothing. The agreement was signed. 24 months of pay, benefits, and a clause stating I was free to work wherever I chose. Allison stood to leave. "Any company that hires you will never work with Wexler again," she hissed. "I'm not looking for work," I replied. "I'm building something." I walked out with Gordon, check in hand, not just vindicated, but fueled. Back at Corner Core, I laid the check on the workbench. "Let's hire 3 more and fast-track the prototype." This wasn't revenge. This was momentum. They looked up from scattered blueprints and open laptops, grease still on their hands and sweat darkening the collars of their shirts. But their eyes, those told me they believed. The warehouse smelled like sawdust, steel, and potential. The east side of Columbus wasn't flashy, but it was cheap and big, and it was ours. We'd ripped out old shelves, installed workbenches, and partitioned a corner office with plywood. Dana called it industrial chic. Mike called it functional. I just called it a start. Jason was already wiring the prototype rig, his fingers flying across a tablet screen. He had that wild-eyed energy of someone finally unleashed. 2 more engineers, Rachel, fluid systems, and Marcus, electronic control, had signed on that week. All former Wexler, all brilliant, all undervalued until now. But with each hire came fear. "Are we going to get sued?" Rachel asked. "I signed a non-compete," Marcus admitted. "Think they'll enforce it?" I didn't lie. "They might try, but we're not poaching, we're inviting. There's a difference, and Gordon's on top of it." Gordon reviewed every offer letter, every confidentiality clause. "You're clean," he told us. "As long as no one brings over proprietary code or customer lists, they can't touch you." That gave the team enough peace of mind to focus, and focus they did. Then came the first email from Jennifer, still stuck at Wexler's lab. 3 late shipments in 2 weeks that she wrote. Midwest Manufacturing is threatening to pull. She attached a blurry internal memo. Budget cuts, missed deadlines, and customer complaints stacking up like firewood. I forwarded that email to Lewis. Within hours, we had a lunch set with Midwest's purchasing manager. He didn't ask many questions. He just said, "When can you deliver?" 60 days, I told him. He nodded. "You're hired." That night, my phone buzzed. "Charles, we need to talk," he said. "It's about Wexler Tech. It's worse than you know." I looked out the office window. Our prototype was humming. Our team was growing. And now the company I helped build was calling for help. "I'll come by tomorrow," I told him, "but I'm not coming as an employee." "Understood," Charles said. "Come as a builder." His voice was softer than I remembered. Less the booming founder, more a man burdened by regret. But it still carried weight, enough to draw me back to the very place I thought I'd never return. Charles's house sat on a quiet street shaded by oak trees, far from the industrial chaos. His living room had been turned into a makeshift war room. Around the coffee table were Thomas, a board member, two former Wexler engineers, and a legal counsel I didn't recognize. They looked worn down. Not the powerful board I once presented quarterly metrics to, but a group trying to salvage a legacy slipping through their fingers. One by one they nodded at me. Not as a former employee, but as a potential rescuer. Charles got right to it. The company's bleeding, orders are down, quality is tanking. Allison, she's not leading, she's liquidating. I didn't respond immediately, because part of me wanted to say, that's not my problem anymore. But another part, the part that spent 18 years in those halls, couldn't ignore the call. The board was already floating ideas, temporary partnership, subcontracting, even a silent acquisition. Your team at Corner Core is exactly what we need to stabilize the hydraulics division, one of them said. I looked at Charles. Are you asking for a buyout? Or a merger, he said, with leadership transfer. They voted that night, unanimous. They were done with Allison's reign. The hydraulics division, what little of it was left, would be absorbed into Corner Core. Leadership, innovation, team, ours. I'll do it, I said, but there's a line in the sand. Allison stays out. No shares, no veto power, no voice. Charles nodded. That can be arranged. We scheduled the announcement for the next Wexler all-hands meeting. My first step back into that building wouldn't be as an employee. It would be as the man holding the blueprint for their future. The words dropped into the room like a stone in a still pond. All eyes turned to the front of the room, where I stood, flanked by Charles and the chairman of the board. Allison's face drained of color. The all-hands meeting hadn't changed much. Same long table, same corporate posters on the wall about vision and synergy. But the energy had shifted. Employees whispered, darted glances. They knew something big was coming. They just didn't know what. Allison sat at the far end, surrounded by her executive team, all under 35, all looking nervously at their tablets. Behind me stood Mike, Dana, and Jason. No longer Wexler Tech castoffs, but the leadership team of Corner Core. The line had been drawn. You can't do this, she snapped, rising to her feet. I'm the majority shareholder. Charles stood. You were. I retained 51% under trust, and I voted in favor of the merger. Her voice trembled. You said this was my company. It was never about ownership, Allison, Charles replied. It was about stewardship. I stepped forward and opened the folder in my hand. Corner Core will absorb Wexler's hydraulics division. Employees will retain seniority. Quality control protocols will be reinstated. Supplier relationships restored. We're here to rebuild, not erase. The room broke into scattered applause. Charles handed me a key card. Frank Dalton is now Executive Director of Operations. Full authority. I nodded once. Allison stood frozen, unable to speak. She walked out without a word. No farewell, no fight, just silence. And maybe that was the real end. Not the severance check, not the lawsuit, not even the merger. Just her absence. 1 year later, the new facility hummed with life. Corner Core Harper Custom Hydraulics was thriving. 3 new patents, 5 Fortune 500 clients, 0 employee turnover. I stood with Charles on the observation deck, overlooking it all. She called, he said suddenly, from Miami, asked if I'd invest in her new firm. I raised an eyebrow. I told her no. Told her to come home and start at the floor like you did. I smiled. Smart man. Below us, Jason trained new hires. Dana inspected shipments. Mike sketched a new design. It was working because it was built with respect, not ego, and that made all the difference.